And finally, meet Phil Kreindler, CEO of Infoteam Sales Process Consulting AG. Infoteam has trained professionals in leading organizations around the globe like ABB, Allianz, CGI, Credit Suisse, EY, HP, KPMG, PwC, SAP, Siemens, Sika, Sprint, US Bank, and Vodafone, to name a few. Phil has published articles about the success factors in B2B selling in the Harvard Business Review and is the author of the award winning book Customized Selling. Learn how customers want you to sell. Everybody, meet Phil. Phil, welcome to this special section on the extraordinary outcomes. I'm delighted to have you, especially because you could make time and early in the morning. Tell me a bit about your work so that our listeners sort of connect. A lot of them know already because you are in the channel. Tell a bit about your work so far.
Well, I'd like to start by thanking you for the opportunity to participate in this interview. My name is Phil Kreindler. Although I am British by nationality, I've been living in Switzerland now for the last 45 years or so. And all of my career, I've been in sales. So for the first 15 years, I was in B2B sales in the computer industry. I had the honor to work for a company called Hewlett Packard. And since 1990, I have been running a sales consulting company called Infoteam, the sales process architects. And we've worked for about 2,500 clients globally. We've most really trained about 160,000 people in total. And basically what we do is we help salespeople qualify and win opportunities. We have a sales methodology which we tailor to our customers' business. And then we introduce it these days through online trainings. And then we support the application of the concepts through what we call opportunity pit stops. So really helping salespeople to win their own deals. From an industry perspective, I've most probably worked myself for about 350 sales organizations across about 60 industries.
That sounds so much more than ever I'll be even attempting to do.
Well, it's very difficult to say you've been doing the same thing for 31 years. I say I've been doing the same thing better every year for 31 years.
I'm sure. So let's dive right in. There is this elephant in the room that we want to address and we believe people are not talking about, which is the extremely poor conversion rate in B2B sales, from lead to conversion rate. The percentage, and I'm told that you can slice and dice percentages any which way you like, but these are respectable research agencies whose other data is very well accepted, who talk of anything between 1.8% to 5, 6, 7% of conversion mostly. There are, of course, some segments where the conversion rate is more, but mostly in B2B sales, it is hovering in the lower single digit. What do you think? Is there a really elephant there, or is it something somebody's imagining?
Well, I think there's a big misconception about what is a lead. Yeah. Now, if you look at, let me take it up my own business. If I look at that, so if somebody downloads an ebook, if they read one of our blogs, that's a very different level of interest compared to somebody who has maybe received a recommendation about our services from one of his colleagues, and then he contacts us with a real need. Yeah. So I think the 5% figure that you're mentioning is, first of all, it needs to be clearly defined. Yeah. What is actually a lead? So coming back to the example I just gave you, I would say somebody downloading an ebook, maybe he's just educating himself on the topic of the sales process. That is, cannot be rated at the same level as somebody who's calling us with a concrete need. So I think the 5% figure that you're mentioning, in my personal opinion, would suit better to the first category, which I wouldn't call a lead in myself. I would call it a name, a suspect. yeah, but definitely not a lead. And I think the closing rate for the second example I gave you is much, much higher. Yeah. And obviously, there's a big bandwidth in between it. So I personally feel that the closing rate between shall we say, a qualified lead and an order, in my opinion, should be at least 30%. Yeah.
Okay. Just a corollary there, and we'll come back to the main discussion, is that typically we are all in commodities business, right? It's very rare that I'm selling something which nobody else is selling. And if I have multiple competitors, I can, I mean, I would like to believe that unless somebody is really bad in the same category, uh, the the market will get split between the top three about 80% and the bottom the rest of the 20%, right?
Okay.
Again, I mean, these are all generic numbers. So how possible is it that you will end up with 30%? That's the question.
Well, let me first of all explain why it's absolute. I mean, I've stated 30% as an absolute minimum figure. Yeah, I've been conservative there. Why is that? Why is that figure an absolute minimum, in my opinion? Because in B2B sales, the amount of effort involved in losing is more or less the same as the amount of effort in winning. Okay, and the amount of effort to win or lose has increased significantly over the last, 5 to 10 years. Okay, so that's why, in my opinion, the objective must be, if you look at your sales funnel, in my opinion, the sales funnel you've been mentioning looks like this. It's broad all the way down, stays broad, and then coming out at the bottom, you've got little drips. Yeah, coming out of the bottom of the sales funnel. My personal opinion, the aspiration should be that the sales funnel looks more like a letter T, a capital letter T. So it's broad at the top. Yeah, you're doing a lot of demand generation activities, and then you are doing a good qualification. Yeah, you're narrowing the sales funnel, and then you have a very high win rate. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we've been in business now for over 30 years. If I had a win rate of 5%, I would have been out of business a long, long time ago. Yeah.
It's an interesting point because either you are doing something nobody else is doing. To be able to do that,
I will explain that to you. Let me explain that. Let me explain that to you. So let's assume I'm working on your hypotheses. Let's assume that a company is doing an RFP process, yeah, and they're looking at 5 to 7 vendors. Yeah, that's quite typical. Yeah, they have a procurement process which says that they've got to look at 5 to 7 vendors. In many businesses, the offerings are actually quite comparable. Okay. So what makes the difference between whether you are, just another column in an Excel table or whether you win the business? In a world where you use the word commodity, I would say the offerings are quite comparable with each other. Yeah. So in that situation where you are lacking USPs, what we believe is that your sales approach must be perceived as a USP. You have to design every single step of the sales process so that it is perceived as an ideal customer experience. I call that ICE. Yeah. And often the way that customers perceive the sales process is nice, not an ideal customer experience. So the more you get towards similar offerings, the more important, how the customer perceives and feels good about each and every single step in their procurement process with you. That becomes the big differentiator in a world where the offerings are very, very similar. Have I expressed myself?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. I get it totally. My only question is that as organizations become more and more educated, and I'm talking from the sales side, I'm not talking of the buyer side. The buyer side education
Yeah.
we can touch upon later. people will also figure this out, right? So, so,
Okay.
so, so to be
People,
able,
you mean salespeople will figure this out?
yes. So my competitors, so to say, would also figure out that I need to have a ice and I have to avoid nice. And where does that lead us? Because end of the
Well,
day,
I mean, the reality, yeah, I like your skeptical mindset, which is good, realistic mindset. Look, I believe that if you ask 100 salespeople whether what their USPs are, yeah, what their USPs are, my gut feeling is that over 90% of them will talk about product or solution strengths. Yeah. Very few of them will say that, well, actually, we don't, our solutions are quite comparable to the competition. I've got to make sure that how I come across, how we come across as a team, that becomes an ideal customer experience. So I personally, I feel that most salespeople are not that smart. They look for USPs in their products, in their solutions, in their company, but they don't really every day work on their own sales process and continually improve, become better to make it an ideal customer experience. That's my opinion.
fair enough. One interesting point I want to bring to your notice, and I do a podcast called the Buyer Side Chat where I speak to B2B buyers. There is no podcast focused on B2B buyers, and I'm trying very hard to ensure that we can do it on a sustained basis. It's very difficult to get buyers to come on and talk. So when they talk to me and I ask them the same question, how do you choose between 5 vendors selling you the same solution? They don't talk about the sales process experience at all. They
Okay.
tell me 2 things. One, do I see myself working with them for the next 10 years? Which means, do they have a roadmap of technology development and whatever the product they're buying or the service they're buying? Is there a roadmap I can see that they will be able to grow with my growth plans? That's one. And number 2, what kind of value adds can they bring to the table which is beyond the product or service I'm buying today? I mean, they do talk about exceptional salespeople.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So nothing to take away from that. And maybe what they're not articulating appropriately is what you are talking about, that these exceptional salespeople are using a different kind of approach. I completely sort of buy that.
Professional. They wouldn't use that word. They wouldn't use the word, I bought from this company because it was an ideal customer experience. Yeah. That, they would say a number of things like the ones you mentioned, but they would say that they're very professional. Yeah. They said, the things that they cannot fulfill, they said no to. They were very responsive. Yeah, those things they would say. So that's also part of your sales approach. But coming to your comment there about procurement people, in most B2B sales that our customers are in, the procurement people often get involved at the end. Yeah, there is an evaluation, and that's where it's the business people who are sort of making the recommendation. Let me give you an example. We have right now a few customers who have BMW as one of their largest customers. So the procurement policy at BMW is that the business side basically has to come up with 3 recommendations, 3 companies. Yeah. The solutions are designed to be very similar, yeah, and then it's handed over to procurement. All right. So I think the impact of the sales process and what the customer experience, I think it is very valid with all the business decision makers. Yeah. I don't think it's not valid with procurement. Yeah, they're also looking to work with professional salespeople. Yeah, but obviously they're involved at the end to get the better price. Yeah.
Well, the if you look at the new Gen Procurement professional, he's
Yeah.
actually coming very early into the process, and
Okay.
he's
You might
actually
set up the evaluation.
not only that, he's actually developing vendors they are going to work with 2 years down the line.
The list of vendors, yeah.
They are going to they're understanding the technology. They are really the in-house subject matter experts, if you please.
Yeah, I understand.
So
That's
it's a
modern-
different
modern
breed.
procurement people,
Yeah, it's a different breed, and it's not. I mean, I understand what you are telling completely, because that was the industrial era model, but it is rapidly changing for
Yeah.
the new world.
So I agree with you. The term "an ideal customer experience" that needs to be broken down into concrete, tangible things. And I think if you break it down into concrete, tangible things, you'll find that that procurement people, professional procurement people, are also receptive to that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, I mean, I have not met a single head of sales or a CEO, and I talk to a lot of them, uh, past and present, who say that, oh, getting our target this year was a breeze.
Yeah.
One point. Second point, they still say that 50 to 60% of the sales folks are not going to make their quota. Right?
Yep.
So, what, according to you, do you see are the real challenges that any sales organization in a B2B space is facing? Of course, I mean, as you said, if you slice it down, challenges in manufacturing could be different from challenges in hospitality or challenges in transportation and logistics and so on. But broadly, if you are able to sort of say, these are the top three things I see across sectors, what would they be?
Are you talking about marketing or sales?
Sales.
Okay, so let's work on the assumption that marketing, well, it's not just marketing, it's a whole combination of activities. It's your own activities, it's the support you get from marketing, it's the brand awareness of the company, that they're generating leads. And they are generating leads which, in my opinion, merit the title a lead. Okay?
Right.
Okay, so let's put that aside and make that assumption. Then there are, I think the key areas are in the execution of a good sales process. Yeah, I mean there are dozens of success factors, but let's just look at a couple of them. I think right now the quantification of the benefits is particularly important. Yeah, it's often called a business case. Why? Because customers, their entire portfolio of topics that they're going to invest in has changed. Yeah, due to COVID. Yeah, so a project which had a top priority, maybe pre-March last year, now has got a lower priority in their portfolio list. So it's absolutely crucial that the salespeople are working on opportunities and they are creating a business case and including that in their proposal to help their customers justify the investment. So basically, good salespeople are people who are increasing the importance of the topic in the customer's organization. If you don't have a business case these days, it's going to be very, very difficult. You're not going to lose to the competition, but you're likely to end up losing to no decision. Okay? So that's one key topic. I think another key topic is, and this hasn't changed that much, maybe it's become more critical, is the topic about who you are engaging with in the customer organization. You've read a lot of studies, and I'm sure you're aware of the studies which say that many more people are involved in B2B decisions these days than in the past. On average, maybe 7.8 people are involved in decisions compared to 3.6 people a few years ago. Okay? So your ability to maneuver, gain trust with people, and leverage those contacts to gain access to other members of the buying center and get the sales process under control. That is obviously also a very, very critical success factor. Yeah. Now, I'm going to put your ability to create trust also very, very high. When I said before, you've got to create an ideal customer experience, That has a lot to do with trust. It's the way you prepare and conduct online meetings, presentations online. Yeah, that is also an absolute critical success factor. Yeah, most people these days, they still do not have, or most companies, they don't have a framework for preparing and conducting good first meetings. You mentioned my book before, based on what customers expect from good first meetings. Yeah. So they're not as professional. So it's the business case, it's the buying center. They're not nearly as professional that they need to be. Yeah. Obviously, the value proposition is very important. Yeah. That they are articulating a value proposition, not just the business value, but they're also focusing on the different goals and decision criteria of the different members of the buying center. And what is absolutely critical is that you are supporting your customer in internal selling. Yeah. These days, it's less about, what are the differences between your solution and the competitor's solution. Selling, in my opinion, is about enabling your customer to get internal buy-in. So good salespeople who have a very high win rate are people who are focused on helping their customer to get internal buy-in, maybe from people that the salesperson themselves doesn't have any contact to. I mean, there are, I would say there are at least 12 things that you really need to have under control in a good sales process, but those are just a few of them.
So my question was really the challenges. So if I flip those points, those are the challenges that people are facing. So not building a use case, or not getting to the center, understanding the center of the decision making, and not being professional enough in their first touch and so on. These are, according to you, the big challenges that a sales organization is facing. Would that be correct to say?
If they've got a good solution, yes. Yeah. I'm always working on the assumption that they've got a competitive solution. Yeah.
One quick question on this one. You mentioned that they should enable the person they're meeting to sell it internally. So this selling internally is selling their solution vis-a-vis the competitor solution. Is that the selling you are talking about?
Yes, customer internal selling. Because the success factors that I mentioned before, they're all tied together. So assuming that you do not have total coverage of the buying center, so you're more and more relying on your existing contacts, who you've got their trust, you've done a very, very good sales process, extremely professional, they trust you, and then you end up relying on those people to sell your solution internally. And in my opinion, most salespeople don't equip their contacts with the right type of information in the right format that they need to do that internal selling. Yeah. I mean, if coming to giving you an example, one of our largest customers is an insurance company, German insurance company called Allianz. And we won a very large corporate assignment for their B2B, not where they sell to business to consumer, but the B2B part. There were about 15 people involved in the decision. Yeah, we did all the things I mentioned before, covering the buying center, making sure that the customer not just read our value proposition, but experienced our value proposition. But we still ended up lacking contact to about 8 key people. Yeah. If we had tried to get access to those people, it most probably would not have been a good idea. Yeah. So the information we prepared for our supporters was in a format that they needed for internal communication, and it helped them shine. I always say, it made them look good in the eyes of other people. And that's also part of ICE, ideal customer experience, is that the customer feels that you are providing them with information that they need to get the buy-in from, other people in the buying center.
How, over the last several decades of your work, how have you seen the buyer and the buying process change?
So, you mentioned before there are different categories of buyers. Yeah, they are, I would say, the more traditional, buyers who get involved at the end just want a better price. Yeah, and then you have the more strategic buyers who are building up a portfolio of potential suppliers for the future. They are consulting the business. They're doing a different job now. The RFP, the reality, so that is definitely a trend. Yeah, towards there are still a small percentage, but there are more, I would say, strategic buyers these days. Yeah, but the reality is, what I see a lot now is that this is the decade of the buyers. Yeah, they, companies were senior sales executives, for example. They were able to choose their own CRM system. They were able to choose their own sales methodology up till maybe 10 years ago. These days, they've got to go through an evaluation process. So there are corporate guidelines in the company which says you've got to look at 5 to 7 companies. There are no preferences, and this formal process has really gone a little bit out of control. Yeah, well, it's in my opinion. Yeah, whether it actually results in the best solution being bought, I would question that. Yeah.
It's an interesting point, because that sort of questions the wisdom of the buyer.
Yeah.
Imagine I'm the vendor and I have 4 other competitors and I sort of was not able to sell. I'm questioning the judgment of the buyer, saying he really didn't understand what he really needed, but I did.
Okay, I know we're touching on a critical point here, but
Yes.
One of the blogs that I wrote is that starting with an RFP, that's the way to buy the wrong decision, the wrong solution. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that this very standardized process that procurement, whether they are strategic procurement people or more tactical procurement people, this very stringent process, yeah, I wonder whether that actually results in buying the best solution. Yeah. Let me give you an example quickly of a strategic way of procuring that I think does result in buying the best solution. So one of our clients it's a large Big Four player, and they recently won a deal at a large German chemicals company. Yeah. And what the chemicals company did, the procurement said they want to, in the first stage, they want to have a 5-page PowerPoint presentation, no more than 5 pages, about how they would respond to this particular need. Yeah, no more than 5 pages. Then they said they're going to go down from 12 vendors down to 3 vendors. And then for each of those remaining 3 vendors, they're going to give each of them a 1-day workshop where they're going to be able to meet all the members of the buying committee or the buying center, and where the customer expects to meet all the people who are going to be involved in the delivery. And they could do a 1-day workshop. Yeah. Now, that is a very smart way of doing things. Yeah. Shortlisting things first, and then going back to the idea of, creating an environment where buying and selling is based on trust and real capabilities, and not what people fill out in an Excel table.
Yeah. I think that's smart. Although their whole decision that it should be 5 pages can be questioned, but I agree. I think buyers are evolving faster than we are acknowledging, and we'll see that manifestation. And you yourself said, that this is the decade of the buyer. I think we need to be cognizant of that fact. Phil, this was wonderful. By no means end to the discussion, but I would love to chat with you again. Before I let you
It would
go, would
be a
you?
pleasure to do that. Yeah, we're filling the dots between Europe and India in the area of selling. Very interesting.
Uh, Before I let you go, would you like to say how our listeners and viewers can get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can just enter Phil Kreindler, Kreindler in Google. You should find us, or Infoteam Consulting. Yeah,
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Thank you so much.
thank you very much.